Next up, we have Ike Iguanu, the offensive lineman out of NC State. And I say that very intentfully, offensive lineman, because it seems like everybody is shoehorning Ike in at tackle. Everybody who says, like, oh, he could go in the top 2, 3, 4 picks, they're putting him at tackle. And I actually think I'm higher on Ike at guard, which, we'll talk a little bit more about as the video goes on. Because that's a very, very interesting debate in itself, right? But just in terms of Ike as the prospect, what does he bring to the table? I like to start off generally with his measurements, his measurables, right? 6'4", 310 pounds with 34-inch arms. I think, at tackle it's a little bit short maybe, but everything else is fine, right? I think he has a flexible enough body type where you could probably play him at both, even though I might prefer one over the other. I think he has the size, and then the athleticism, I think, is to an extent there as well, right? If you just look at the raw testing numbers of 4.93 40-yard dash, that is very fast for anybody, but especially for somebody that's 310 pounds, no question. The broad jump, 9 feet, impressive. 29-inch vertical, 7.823 cone. That's not quite as good as the rest, but very solid athletic profile, solid size, and I think people just see that combination of the two and they say, oh, tackle. Well, I don't know, because just for me, as we get into more of the film grade and discussion, a lot of these negatives that I have for him can be, I don't want to say eliminated inside, but they can be aided inside. And in that regard, we'll just start off with the first one. It's his pass protection. I don't know if he has quick enough feet to be a tackle, a high-level tackle at the next level, going up against particularly some of these speed edge rushers. One thing that you would see is when he was facing, not necessarily a 5 technique, but say a 7 or a wide 9, these wide speed rushers, it just felt like you could see in his footwork a panic, right? You could see sometimes he would start clicking his heels together and compromise his base. You would see how quickly he would open up, and when you're opening up, what I'm meaning is that your hips are turned so that your eyes are facing the sidelines rather than the line of scrimmage. One of the big things about being an offensive lineman is you always want to stay square so that way you can kind of funnel stuff inside out, if that makes sense. But it felt like Ike, he would almost freak out and open up way earlier than he had to against some of these edge rushers, some of these speed rushers in particular. At guard, that's never really an issue. You're in a phone booth in terms of you're probably either blocking a 1 technique or a 3 technique. Both guys, you don't have to even move your feet and you could touch both, either gap that the guy would be in. Tackle, you're on an island and you got to go meet him on that island, and it just felt like sometimes that process of getting to the island was a little bit questionable at times for Ike. I thought he was a little bit top heavy and could lunge a little bit. That's maybe more so as a run blocker than as a pass blocker, but either way, like there was almost a feeling of like when he could get hands on you, he was very desperate to do so, because like he was a little bit behind with his feet, so I gotta get you with my upper body no matter what. And that's something that wouldn't really be the case at guard, because both gaps are right there. Like there's no lunging that necessarily needs to happen because you're within arm's reach of each other before the play even begins. I wrote nitpicking, but his punch placement is coming in a little bit high. That was, something I took a little bit of points off slightly. I should say I gave him an 8 out of 10 there. But again, I think on the edge, missing with your hands it's much less forgiving on the edge than it is inside, because on the inside, again, we're dealing with slower athletes, right? Opposed to facing a 250-pound wide 9 edge rusher, you might be facing a 350-pound, Vince Wilfork-like 1 technique, right? Or nose tackle at times. And in that regard, you just have a lot more time to to recover almost, right? Because you're dealing with worse athletes. I talked about how Ike was a good athlete. We'll put him on the inside and he'd be an exceptional athlete. Put him on the edge and just on film, I don't think that athleticism always shines through. I also thought that one of his slight concerns, more so as a run blocker than anything else, was sometimes his footwork. He could take too flat of angles. It's kind of funny because in the last video I was talking about how Tyler Linderbaum, the center out of Iowa, how he had like this exceptional ability to be able to reach guys that were 2 gaps removed, right? So if he's a center, he could reach a 3 technique. Ike at left tackle, like there were times where he was struggling to reach the 3 technique. So we're talking about 1 gap removed. All you have to do is get to the inside shoulder of the guy next to you. And it just felt like with his footwork and maybe his athleticism to an extent, it just felt like he wasn't always able to do that. Whereas then at guard, you'd be reaching 1 techniques more often, right? And I think he would be able to do that most certainly as long as you worked on his angles and footwork and whatnot. So I think pretty much everything that I've mentioned so far would not be eradicated at guard, but it would be less of a concern at guard, right? And then a lot of his strengths, if we just read through from some of his strengths really quick, I have good power behind his punches. That works no matter where you're at, right? I have impressive motor and fight, late in reps particularly. That works no matter where you're at. Solid mobility, pulling and on backside cutoffs. Where do you pull more, guard or tackle? It's almost certainly guard, right? We were talking about that athleticism, the 4.940. I think that would be useful at guard depending on the scheme that you get put in. I have generally good usage of length, especially for a former guard. Now that's something that's a little bit more questionable because I know some people think that you want shorter arms on the inside so that way you can get the full extent of your punch, whereas they might say his 34-inch arms are too long. I don't know. I as somebody who's played tackle and guard and center, I think that's more... I think at that point you're kind of getting too far into the weeds almost, Like if you're not going to play a guy at guard because he had arms that were half an inch too long, like I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. I thought he was strong, very strong while anchoring versus a bull rush. Problem is, as a tackle, it felt like guys were just trying to beat him with their speed, whereas on the inside, you're going to see so many more bull rushes, right? And then the other thing I put was generally he's generating a lot of movement as a run blocker, especially inside on these sort of down blocks, as well as, when you just ask him to block out on somebody and collapse an edge. I thought he was very good there. And in that regard, just going through some of the grades I gave him, 21 out of Pass Pro, out of 25. Mainly because, again, the foot quickness, just a little bit questionable to me. Just a little bit questionable. The run blocking, 14.5 out of 15. I thought was very impressive. Balance, I mentioned, a little bit more of an issue on the outside than on the inside. We'll just say that. But 5.75 out of 10. I thought he was very impressive in terms of the power and strength. I gave him a 9 out of 10. And then 8.75 on physicality and finishing. And I pretty much touched on everything else. So that brings him out to, as you see on the screen, an 84.59 at tackle. The problem is, if I put him on my guard scale and, kind of tinker with my grades accordingly, what that ends with at guard, I actually have Ike graded as an 86.61 guard. You might say, what the heck are 2 points? And that's fair right now, but if we put him on last year's big board, just for example, that guard grade, 86.61, would put him as my 4th highest graded player, behind only Kyle Pitts, Rashawn Slater, and Micah Parsons. That was, that's very good company to be in, if we date back to last year. On the flip side, with this 84.59, first round grade, right? Very good grade at tackle. But that would have put him behind 15 guys. So not only those 3 I mentioned, but then Devontae Smith, Penei Sewell, Greg Newsome, Jamar Chase, Pat Surtain, Owusu Koromoa, Waddle, Davion Nixon, Azeez Ojulari, Farley, Pay, Jamin Davis. He would be behind all of those guys at tackle. So that sort of hopefully gives you guys an idea for the level by which I'm talking about guard versus tackle. I think he could still be a really good tackle, right? Just as of right now, I've only made a couple videos. he's one of the highest guys on my board, and he still will be, regardless of what position he plays and what position you would have him graded at. But at guard, I just think there's a lot more upside there, both in the short term and in the long term. I think he could be a very, very good guard. Not that he can't be a good tackle, but I just think there's more stuff to work through at tackle. And at that point, I might just rather have him at guard. So, with that being said, I'd be very interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section down below. Other than that, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, notification bell, all that stuff. So that way you're in the loop with my future uploads. I'm kind of spamming you guys today, but it's the lead up to the NFL draft. What can I say, right? So if you want to be spammed, if you want to get more videos, as always, subscribe and be on the lookout in your sub boxes, right? Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, though. I'm mic'd up, now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys. See you next video.